The chapel smelled of lilies and denial. I stood near the back, a black dress clinging to me like a second skin I hadn't asked for, watching the mourners file past the open casket. They'd murmur something about what a good man my husband Alex had been, touch my arm with cold, fleeting pity, and then move on to my brother-in-law, Mark. With Mark, they lingered. They hugged him tighter, whispered longer, their faces a mask of shared, profound grief. He was the brother, the last of the Carter men, the one left to carry the family's legacy now that Alex was gone. From where I stood, I could see the practiced sadness on Mark's face, the way he'd shake his head and clench his jaw, as if holding back a wave of unbearable pain. But his eyes, when they occasionally flickered in my direction, held no such sorrow. They held something else. Triumph. Alex had died 3 days ago. A single-car accident on a rain-slicked mountain road. The police said his brakes failed. A tragic, unavoidable mechanical failure. He'd been coming home from a final meeting to secure funding for his new software patent, a project he'd poured his soul into for 2 years. Now he was gone, and I was a widow at 32. The world had tilted on its axis, and the only person who could help me write, it was lying in a polished mahogany box, forever silent. After the service, the family gathered at the house Alex and I had painstakingly renovated. Our home, or what used to be our home. I walked in to find Mark and his wife, Samantha, already in the kitchen, speaking in low, urgent tones with the family's estate lawyer. They didn't stop when I entered. "Clara, good, you're here," Mark said, not looking at me but at a stack of papers on the counter. "We're just getting a preliminary overview of Alex's assets. The lawyer says it's best to move quickly." I stared at him, the half-eaten sympathy platters from neighbors still sitting on the dining table. My husband's funeral had ended less than an hour ago. "Move quickly?" I repeated, my voice a hollow echo of itself. "Mark, he's not even buried." Samantha placed a hand on his arm, her expression a perfect blend of condescension and feigned empathy. "Clara, darling, we know this is hard, but Alex wouldn't want the business to falter. The patent, the company, it all needs to be managed. Mark is the logical choice to take over." The patent had been Alex's dream, not the family's. He had started the company with his own savings, refusing to take a cent from the Carter family trust, a decision that had always been a sore spot for Mark. I wanted to scream, to tell them to get out of my house, to let me grieve in peace, but the fight had gone out of me, replaced by a deep, numbing exhaustion. I just nodded and retreated to the living room, sinking into the armchair Alex always used to sit in. From the corner of my eye, I watched them. They moved through my home like vultures, pointing at paintings, discussing the value of the antique grandfather clock, their grief a transparently thin veneer for their greed. Later, as people started to leave, Mark approached me. He had a small, almost imperceptible smirk on his face. "Don't worry about a thing, Clara," he said, patting my shoulder. "We'll take care of everything. The house, the estate. You just focus on, well, you know." He gestured vaguely, as if my grief were a minor inconvenience he was allowing me to have. As I closed the door behind the last of them, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. My husband was dead, and his family was already erasing me from the life we had built. I stood in the silent house, surrounded by ghosts, and realized I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. A week passed in a blur of condolence cards and wilting flowers. The house felt cavernous, each room echoing with a silence that was louder than any noise I had ever heard. I moved through the days like a ghost, a spectator in my own life. Mark had been true to his word. He and Samantha had taken care of everything. They had changed the locks on Alex's downtown office, telling me it was for security reasons. They had frozen the joint business account, explaining it was standard procedure, until the estate was settled. Every move was couched in the language of concern, but it felt like a methodical siege. I was being walled off, piece by piece, from the life I had shared with Alex. Each morning, I'd walk to the mailbox with a knot of dread in my stomach, expecting to find another letter from their lawyer, another formal notice of my growing irrelevance. But on Tuesday, exactly 8 days after Alex's death, there was something different. Tucked between a sympathy card from a distant aunt and a bill for the funeral flowers was a small, brown paper-wrapped package. It was light, no more than a few ounces. I turned it over, and my breath caught in my throat. The return address was a post office box I didn't recognize, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was Alex's. A frantic, almost spidery scrawl, so different from his usual neat, architectural print. My name, Clara Miller, was written in the center. He'd used my maiden name. The postmark was stamped the day before the accident. My heart started a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. How? Why? I carried the package inside, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold it. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Alex and I had shared coffee every morning, and stared at the box. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to open it. It felt like disturbing a grave, like opening a door to a room I wasn't ready to enter. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a final gift, something he'd ordered for me that had taken a week to arrive. A book, a piece of jewelry, a last, sweet gesture from the man I loved. But the frantic handwriting, the use of my maiden name. My gut told me this was not a gift. It was a warning. Finally, with a deep, shuddering breath, I tore the paper away. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, were two items. The first was a single, old-fashioned skeleton key, heavy and ornate, with a small leather tag tied to it. The second was a sealed envelope, with a single word written on the front in that same urgent script. Read. My fingers felt numb as I picked up the envelope. The paper was crisp, the seal unbroken. Alex had sent this to me. He had wanted me to find this, to read this. He knew something, or he suspected something. The knot of dread in my stomach tightened into a cold, hard stone. Whatever was inside this letter was going to change everything. I broke the seal, unfolded the single sheet of paper inside, and began to read the last words my husband would ever write to me. The world I knew was about to end for a second time. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, it means I was right to be afraid. It means I'm gone, and it wasn't an accident. I can feel the words catching in your throat, the disbelief warring with the cold dread that's probably already creeping into your heart. Please, my love, trust that feeling. Trust me. I am so sorry I never said this to your face. I didn't want to scare you. I thought I could handle it myself, that I could protect you without you ever having to know the darkness that was closing in. I was a fool. I should have trusted you with the truth, just as I've trusted you with my heart for all these years. It's Mark. I know how that sounds. My own brother. But something in him has changed, or maybe something that was always there has finally surfaced. It started a few months ago, after I refused his offer to merge my company with the family's main corporation. He wanted control of my patent, Clara. With the family's, he saw it not as the innovation I believed it to be, but as a cash cow, a quick way to bolster the family's flagging portfolio. He called me sentimental, weak for wanting to build it my own way. The arguments grew uglier. He'd say things, little veiled threats that sounded like jokes at the time. One way or another, that patent will stay in the family, he told me once. Carter men always protect their assets. At the time, I brushed it off as his usual arrogance. Now, I see it for what it was. A promise. Last week, I discovered he'd been making inquiries about my life insurance policy. Not the one we have together, but a separate, private one I took out years ago. He was trying to find out if he could be made a beneficiary. Then, 2 days ago, I hired a private investigator. Just a quiet background check. The initial report came back last night. Mark is in serious financial trouble. He's made a series of disastrous investments and has been using funds from the family trust to cover his losses, hoping no one would notice. He's desperate, Clara. And my patent, if he controlled it, would be his salvation. It would solve all his problems and make him the hero who saved the Carter legacy. The day I'm writing this, I'm heading up to the old Summit Lodge for that final investor meeting. Mark knows. He suggested the route, the winding back road, telling me it would be faster. Less traffic, he said. This morning, I found a small puddle of what looked like brake fluid near my front left tire. It could be nothing, a coincidence. But I can't shake this feeling, this cold certainty that he's planned something. I can't go to the police with just a suspicion. They'd think I was crazy. So I'm sending you this. The key opens a safe. It's in my study, the one place he wouldn't think to look first. It's hidden behind the bookshelf, the one we bought at that flea market on our honeymoon. You have to move the third shelf from the top. It slides out. Inside that safe is everything. Copies of his financial records, emails he thought he deleted, and a recording I made of our last argument. It's all there. Don't trust them, Clara. Don't trust any of them. They will try to make you feel small, isolated, and powerless. They will try to take everything. Don't let them. You are stronger than you know. You were always the bravest person I ever knew. Use what's in that safe. Don't let him get away with this. Avenge me, my love. But more importantly, live. Live freely and live for us both. Forever yours, Alex. The letter fell from my trembling fingers, fluttering to the kitchen floor like a dead leaf. The words echoed in the silence of the room, each one a hammer blow against the fragile walls of my grief. It wasn't an accident. It's Mark. I stared at the key on the table, its cold, metallic weight suddenly feeling immense, terrifying. It wasn't just a key. It was a burden, a responsibility, a final, desperate plea from the man I loved. My first instinct was denial. It was a wave of nausea so powerful, I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. This couldn't be real. Alex was just being paranoid. He was stressed, overworked, seeing shadows where there were none. Mark was arrogant, greedy, and selfish. Yes. I had known that for years. But a killer? My mind recoiled from the thought. It was too monstrous, too cinematic, too far from the realm of polite family dinners and passive-aggressive holiday gatherings. But then, the memories started to surface, unbidden, like shards of glass working their way out of a wound. I remembered a dinner about 2 months ago. Alex had just secured a preliminary patent approval, and he was ecstatic. Mark had been there, his congratulations feeling thin and brittle. "Just be careful who you trust with that thing," Mark had said, swirling the wine in his glass. "An idea that valuable can make people do crazy things." He'd looked directly at Alex when he said it, a strange glint in his eye. At the time, I thought it was a warning about corporate espionage. Now, it felt like a confession. I remembered the week before the accident, Alex coming home late, his face pale and drawn. He'd been unusually quiet, distant. When I asked what was wrong, he just shook his head and said, "Just work stuff, a disagreement with a partner." I pressed him, but he wouldn't say more. "I don't want to worry you," he'd whispered, kissing my forehead. "Say more." He wasn't protecting me from business stress. He was protecting me from his own brother. The nausea receded, replaced by a slow, creeping ice that spread through my veins. It was the chilling certainty of the truth. Alex wasn't paranoid. He was a man who knew he was being hunted. The phone call from the police replayed in my head. "Ma'am, it appears his brakes gave out. There were no skid marks. No skid marks because he never had a chance to brake." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Mark's smugness at the funeral. Samantha's rush to take control. Their calculated, methodical isolation of me. It wasn't just greed. It was a cover-up. They were burying Alex's legacy and me along with it. My grief, raw and gaping only moments before, began to transform. It solidified, hardened, sharpening into something else entirely. It became anger. A cold, quiet, diamond-hard rage. They had not only taken my husband, my future, my life as I knew it. They had done it with a smile and a pat on the shoulder. They had stood at his funeral and mourned the man they had murdered. I picked up the key from the table. Its edges felt sharp against my palm. Alex had trusted me. He had left me the one thing he couldn't entrust to anyone else: the truth. My mission was no longer to grieve. It was to fight. And my first battle would be inside the walls of the house they were so eager to claim. I had to get to that study. Getting back into the house was the first hurdle. Mark had my set of keys, claiming he'd hold on to them for safekeeping until the estate was sorted. He didn't know I had another, a spare I'd made years ago and kept tucked away in my wallet. A tiny silver key that Alex used to joke was my emergency escape key for when his snoring got too loud. Now it felt like my only way in. I waited until late afternoon, when I knew Mark would be at Alex's office, likely shredding any evidence he'd missed, and Samantha would be at her weekly charity luncheon, performing the role of the grieving sister-in-law. I parked my car a block away and walked to the house, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The street was quiet, sleepy. The house looked the same as it always had, but now it felt alien, a place where monsters wore familiar faces. I slipped the key into the lock of the side door leading to the laundry room. It turned with a soft, satisfying click. I held my breath, pushed the door open, and slipped inside. The house was still, suffocatingly so. The air was thick with the scent of lilies from the funeral, now cloying and funereal. I moved silently, my footsteps swallowed by the thick rugs. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. I half expected to find Mark waiting for me around a corner, his face twisting from feigned sympathy to cold fury. My destination was Alex's study at the back of the house. It was his sanctuary, a room filled with books, blueprints, and the faint, comforting smell of old paper and coffee. He had built the bookshelves himself, a floor-to-ceiling masterpiece of dark walnut. It was our proudest DIY project. As I stepped into the room, a wave of grief hit me so hard I had to lean against the doorframe. His favorite leather-bound notebook was still open on the desk, a pen resting beside it as if he'd just stepped away for a moment. I forced the feeling down, channeling it into focus. The letter said the third shelf from the top. I ran my fingers along the smooth wood, counting. 1, 2, 3. The shelf was packed with books on engineering and design theory. I carefully began to remove them, my hands shaking as I placed each one on the floor. Behind them, there was nothing but the solid back panel of the bookshelf. For a sickening moment, I thought I'd misunderstood. Had Alex been delirious? Had I imagined it? Then I remembered what he'd written. It slides out. I pressed my hands against the panel. Nothing. I pushed harder, my frustration mounting. Then my fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible indentation on the left side. I pushed there, and with a low groan, the entire shelf unit shifted inward and then slid to the right, revealing a dark, recessed cavity in the wall. And inside, gleaming in the dim light, was a small black metal safe. And inside, my breath came out in a shaky gasp. It was real. I knelt before it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled the ornate key from my pocket. It fit the lock perfectly. With a turn and a heavy clunk, the safe door swung open. The air that escaped the safe was stale and cool, the scent of secrets kept in the dark. My eyes adjusted to the dim interior, and I saw that it wasn't cluttered. Alex had been methodical, precise. There were only a few items inside, each one chosen with purpose. The first thing I picked up was a manila folder, surprisingly thin. The label on the tab, written in Alex's clear hand, read, MC Financials. I opened it. Inside were printed bank statements and offshore account records. They weren't Alex's. They were Mark's. It was a detailed trail of every dollar he had siphoned from the Carter family trust over the last year, a cascade of red numbers and desperate transfers to cover failing investments. He was in deeper trouble than Alex had even suspected, on the verge of total ruin. The patent wasn't just a life raft. It was his only way out. Beneath the folder was a stack of printed emails, held together with a paperclip. They were between Mark and a man named Sully, whose email signature identified him as the owner of a specialty auto repair shop out by the industrial park. The conversation was chillingly casual. Mark wrote, "Need you to look at a classic. Brakes are feeling a little soft. Want to make sure it's a quiet fix, something that looks like simple wear and tear." Sully's reply came a day later. "No problem. For the price we discussed, it'll look like it gave out on its own. No one will ever know." I dropped the papers as if they had burned my fingers. This was it. This was the proof. A paid-for, premeditated mechanical failure. A murder for hire. disguised as a friendly chat with a mechanic. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to look back inside the safe. There was one more thing, a small black flash drive. No label, no markings, just a tiny piece of plastic that could hold a universe of information. I almost left it, my mind already reeling, but Alex's voice from the letter echoed in my head. Inside that safe is everything. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, along with the papers. I pushed the shelf back into place, carefully replaced the books, and left the study exactly as I had found it. I moved through the house in a daze, my body on autopilot. As I let myself out the side door, locking it behind me, the world outside seemed strangely normal. Birds were chirping. A neighbor was watering their lawn. How could the world keep spinning when mine had been so violently shattered? Back in the safety of my car, I sat for a long time, the evidence resting on the passenger seat like a physical weight. The flash drive felt heavy in my pocket. I knew I couldn't plug it into my own computer. I didn't know what kind of tracking software Mark might have, what digital breadcrumbs I might leave. I needed a secure place, an expert. I needed a lawyer. But first, I had to know what was on that drive. I drove to the public library, a place of quiet anonymity, found an empty computer in a back corner, and slid the drive into the USB port. A single folder appeared on the screen. It was labeled with one word: argument. I clicked it open. Inside was a single audio file. My hand trembled as I put on the headphones and pressed play. Alex's voice filled my ears, strained and angry. Then came Mark's, low and menacing. It was the recording Alex had mentioned, the last argument, and it was worse than anything I could have imagined. The recording began with the low hum of an office after hours. I could hear Alex's voice, tight with a fury I'd rarely witnessed. "I know what you've been doing, Mark. The money from the trust, the shell companies. I have the records." There was a pause, then Mark's laugh, a sound that was no longer just arrogant, but genuinely chilling. "You always were the smart one, Alex. A little too smart for your own good. Did you really think you could build your little empire and leave the family behind?" The argument escalated quickly. Alex accused him of trying to steal his patent. Mark didn't deny it. "It belongs to the family," he'd snarled. Mark didn't. "You're just too sentimental to see that. You're weak. You always have been." Then came the line that made the blood freeze in my veins. "You need to be careful driving home on that mountain road, big brother." Mark's voice dropped to a near whisper, thick with venom. "It's dangerous up there. Things happen. Brakes fail. People disappear. And legacies get passed on to those strong enough to take them." Alex's sharp intake of breath was the last sound before the recording ended abruptly. I ripped the headphones off, my chest heaving. It wasn't a veiled threat. It was a declaration. He had all but confessed. I copied the audio file and the financial documents onto a new, encrypted drive I bought at the library's tech kiosk, then wiped the original. I walked out of the library and into the crisp afternoon air, no longer a grieving widow, but a woman armed with irrefutable proof. My next stop was not the police. Not yet. Alex had been afraid they wouldn't believe a suspicion. I couldn't risk them fumbling a case built on such carefully gathered evidence. I needed an ally, someone smart, ruthless, and completely loyal to Alex's memory. I needed David Chen, my father's old law partner, and a man Alex had always referred to as the only honest shark in the tank. His office was in a sleek downtown high-rise, a world away from the quiet suburban streets where my life had fallen apart. David, a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a will of steel, listened without interruption as I laid out the story, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside me. I placed the folder of emails on his polished desk, followed by the financial records, and finally the encrypted flash drive. He read the emails first, his expression growing graver with each line. He scanned the bank statements, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, he plugged the drive into his laptop and listened to the recording, his face becoming a mask of cold fury. When it was over, he removed the headphones and looked at me, his gaze piercing. "This isn't just greed, Clara," he said, his voice low. "This is a conspiracy to commit murder, and they are going to pay for it. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. I wasn't alone in this anymore. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. My hand jerked, but David gestured for me to answer, mouthing the words, "Put it on speaker." I did. "Clara?" Mark's voice was smooth, oozing with false concern. "I was just calling to check on you. I know this must be a difficult time. Is there anything at all you need?" The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I looked at David, who gave me a slight, steadying nod. "I'm fine, Mark," I said, proud of how even my voice sounded. "Just sorting through some of Alex's old things." There was a slight pause on his end. "Oh? Anything interesting?" he asked, a little too casually. "You'd be surprised," I replied, the double meaning hanging in the air. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." I hung up before he could respond. David smiled grimly. "He's nervous. He's fishing. Good. Let him wonder what's coming." He picked up his phone. "Now," he said, "let's make a call to a friend of mine in the homicide division." The storm broke 2 days later. It wasn't loud or dramatic, not at first. It started with two plainclothes detectives arriving at Mark and Samantha's pristine suburban home. David had arranged it all. He had presented the evidence to the district attorney's office, bypassing the local precinct to ensure it was handled by a senior team who understood the complexities of a white-collar crime turned violent. The audio recording was the linchpin. Mark's own words, his own voice, had become his indictment. I wasn't there when they arrested him, but I saw it on the local news that evening. I wasn't Mark, the respected businessman, being led out of his house in handcuffs, his face a mixture of shock and incandescent rage. Samantha was behind him, weeping, not with grief, but with the indignation of a queen whose castle had just been stormed. The news report mentioned suspicious circumstances surrounding Alex's death and an ongoing investigation into financial fraud at Carter Corporation. The family's reaction was swift and vicious. My phone lit up with calls and texts, not of support, but of condemnation. Alex's mother called me a traitor, a vindictive liar who was trying to tear the family apart out of greed. His cousins accused me of fabricating evidence to get my hands on the inheritance. They closed ranks around Mark, painting him as the victim of a hysterical, gold-digging widow. They couldn't see the truth, or perhaps they chose not to. It was easier to believe I was a monster than to accept that one of their own was. I didn't answer their calls. I didn't read their texts. With David's help, I had filed for a restraining order against the entire Carter clan. Their poison could no longer touch me. The trial was a quiet, brutal affair. Mark's high-priced lawyers tried to paint Alex as unstable and paranoid. They tried to discredit the recording, the emails, the financial trail. But the evidence was overwhelming. The mechanic, Sully, folded under pressure and testified against Mark in exchange for a plea deal. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, and first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like a victory. There was no joy, no triumphant satisfaction. There was only a profound, hollow quiet where the rage had once been. I had honored Alex's last wish. I had fought for him. And now it was over. After the sentencing, I sold the house. I couldn't stay there, not with the ghosts of what had happened and what could have been in every room. I packed up the few things that mattered: our wedding album, his favorite books, the leather-bound notebook from his desk, and moved to a small apartment by the coast, a place where I could hear the ocean and feel the clean, salt-laced air. I used a portion of the estate, now rightfully mine, to establish a scholarship in Alex's name for young, aspiring software engineers, the kind of innovators he had always championed. It was a way to ensure his real legacy, the one built on passion and creation, would live on, untouched by Mark's greed. Some days are still hard. Grief is not a linear path. It's a tide that ebbs and flows. But I am no longer just a widow. I am the woman who uncovered the truth, the woman who fought a silent war and won. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for love. the last and truest act of love I could give the man who had trusted me with his life. Standing on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and gold, I finally understand what Alex meant in his letter. Live freely. And for the first time since he died, I feel like I finally can.